There are some smaller elections across the U.S. today, and there are actually some very important individual issues that are on the ballot. So I want to go through some of these things with you. I don't blame you if you don't know about this, because the mainstream media has done a horrible job covering it, and you probably would have had to go to, various local outlets, or I guess state outlets in some place, in order to get the news that there even was an election today. So again, let's run through some of these issues. The first one, we have an LGBT non-discrimination law that's up for a vote in Houston, Texas. So hopefully the people of Houston will get out there and do the right thing on that one. We have whether or not to nullify universal background checks for gun purchases in Coos County, Oregon. So recently, I believe it was in the wake of Sandy Hook, that either this Oregon state, or more likely just localities in Oregon, made a move to do more stringent background checks, rigid background checks, so universal, so even for private sales. And apparently some people on the right really don't like that, so now they're attempting to possibly roll it back. So for anybody who listens to the show from Coos County, Oregon, you might want to get out there and vote on that issue. I know I have a whopping 3 fans in Coos County, but it's okay because it's population 18 people. I'm kidding. I know nothing about Coos County. The third issue here is whether or not to legalize marijuana in Ohio, but in a really weird way. So Think Progress reports on this, quote, State Issue 3 is a constitutional amendment that would allow marijuana for both medical and personal use for those 21 years or older. If it passes, however, only one group of people would be allowed to grow it, a group of wealthy investors, including the former boy band star Nick Lachey. I love how random that is. Because of the inclusion of this so-called marijuana monopoly, the ballot initiative has been especially controversial. Some who have fought for decades to make marijuana legal in Ohio are opposing it. All right, so that's actually a really tricky issue, because there's no doubt that the way that they're going about legalizing it is shitty. That's the worst way you could possibly legalize it. You have state-sanctioned monopolies on an issue and in a field where there shouldn't be a state-sanctioned monopoly. So there's clearly nepotism at work there. There's corruption and money in politics and, behind-the-scenes bribery where people said, hey, let me get in on this. I want to make money off this, and remember the money I gave you. So no doubt that it's gross as to how this came about. But even with that being said, if I was in Ohio, would I vote for it? I'd say yes. And the reason why is we're just getting the ball rolling here. We're just getting started. So, is this system, the way they set it up, gonna last forever in Ohio, where they legalize it and it's gonna be the monopoly forever? Well, no. You can come back after you make it legal. You can come back via, state law later on and tweak it here or there. Or, naturally, when the federal government acts on this, whether it's decriminalizing or legalizing, however many years down the road, and we don't know how far down the road, but when there's some movement and the federal government budges a little bit on this issue, well then, the state laws become somewhat irrelevant when federal law allows for decriminalized or legalized marijuana all around the country. So I'd hold my nose and vote for it. I hate the way they structured it. It's clearly corrupt the way they structured it, but it's still better than not having it at all, and you can always improve upon it after you get it through. It's kind of like Obamacare when you think about it. Obamacare was the worst kind of healthcare reform that we could have possibly done. It was the furthest right-wing version of healthcare reform that we could have possibly done. But when push comes to shove, I would have voted for it, because we had lost on single payer, even though we had a supermajority, because so many Democrats buckled with the Blue Dog Democrats and stuff like that. And we didn't get a public option. So then the question really did become, do you want to do Obamacare or do you want to do nothing? And the answer to that is, yeah, well, let's do Obamacare, and then hopefully over time we can improve upon it. I view the Ohio weed situation exactly like that. So if I'm in Ohio, I'm absolutely going to go and vote in favor of this. In fact, I was talking to TJ, the amazing atheist, earlier, and he was telling me, I'm going to go vote for it today. Like, he was excited, talking about how he has the opportunity to now go vote for legalized weed. And that's fantastic, and I think he's 100% right. And Nick Lachey, fuck you, bro. Why are you getting in on the corruption? Why can't you be a normal person and fight for it, to legalize it in a way that makes sense? All right, now the fourth thing here is a $15 minimum wage in Tacoma, Washington. So if anybody's listening from Tacoma, Washington, go vote however you'd like. Now, you guys know I'm actually, when it comes to the minimum wage, there are two proposals that I like. One is my favorite, and then the other one's probably a distant second at this point. The distant second is a $12 living wage all around the country that I want the federal government to pass, and you chain it to inflation. Now, that's not my number one because it's actually somewhat inefficient when you look at how economics functions on a state-by-state basis, because $12 in Wyoming is a lot different than $12 in New York City. So what I would like is you set the minimum wage as whatever the living wage is in each state. You have economists determine what a living wage is in each state, and then you chain it to inflation. And, then you would never have to come back and even revisit this issue because the minimum wage would always be a living wage from here on out. That's my number one proposal and policy that I support. But in terms of, going like they're doing here, actually on a state-by-state basis or even smaller than that, and you go locality by locality, by all means, if you want to go out there and increase that wage, go right ahead. Number 5 is whether to give every voter $100 specifically to donate to politicians in Seattle. So they're trying, at the local level, they're trying a version of clean elections, which is, the end goal for something like Wolfpack. That's what we're pushing for on a federal level, on a national level. We want clean elections. We want private money out of politics. And this is one of the ways you can address that. I wrote my college thesis back in the day on the idea of clean elections, and it's a way to limit corruption and make it so the politicians actually represent the people. And they're trying it specifically in Seattle, Washington. Good for them. I'm all for it, but we need to do that also at a federal level. The sixth thing is whether to limit the influence of special interest money in Maine elections. So again, at a state level here, trying to limit corruption. All for it, but we still need it at a federal level. And then we have what to do with $66 million in tax revenue from legal marijuana in Colorado. They have so much money that they don't know what to do with it. That's quite literal. The way that the Colorado Constitution is structured, if you have a gigantic surplus from a certain program, you actually have to ask the voters, what do you want to do with this surplus? They're not allowed to just do whatever they want. So they have to ask the voters, and the voters will determine what exactly they want to do with it. But think about how much this proves how legalized weed is a success. It's so successful that, crime has gone down, all the societal ills have gone down, actually less kids are using. So across the board, it's been net positives. But then when it comes to revenue, they don't even know what to do with all of it. They're like, okay, we got to ask the voters. We got all this money sitting here. We don't know what to do with it. Tremendous. And then finally, the last thing here, whether to formally protect the right to hunt in Texas. Now, this one's really interesting because I'm in favor of hunting. In fact, I think it's more moral for people to hunt, to eat their food that way, than to go buy some meat that was processed at a factory farm. Factory farms are horrendous for animals. So if you go out there and you shoot a deer and then you eat the venison, I support that 100% because you're actually ending the deer's life in a much more humane way and you're eating the meat. So that's significantly better than factory farming. But unfortunately, when you dive into the specifics of this so-called right to hunt, it kind of kneecaps in the future any possible movements to address pollution issues or address climate issues or address regulation in that regard. It makes it so that environmentalists and animal rights activists can't act, for example, if we find out that a certain kind of animal is going extinct and we need to act to protect the community. This so-called right to hunt would make it so that you can't really, move as much in the positive direction as you would like in terms of regulation to stop future ills. So as a general idea, I'm fine with the right to hunt. Again, I think it's much more humane than factory farming, so I give you more credit, if anything. but you have to be careful as to how they word it and what else this kneecaps, because there are unintended consequences of it. So overall, I probably vote no on that, even though I agree with the general sentiment behind it. So there's your breakdown of some of the more important issues here for this smaller election that we have in the U.S. If you haven't voted, go vote.